All right, welcome everyone to the Friday Tech Talk. We are happy to have Alain Lipowicz as our guest speaker today. He is going to talk about strategies and tips on making the most of your background to land a tech job. Alain is a Tech Academy graduate, and we welcome you, Alain, and take it away.
Hi, my name is Alain Lipowicz. I'm a Tech Academy graduate, and right now I'm working for NextGen Healthcare as a software engineer too. I've been working there for about 8 months now. So I started in May of 2022. And I'm going to be talking to you about making the most of your existing background to land a job in tech. So, of course, this entire presentation's focal point is around my own experience, right? So, take that into consideration definitely, but this is going to be my effort to present you with what I found was useful, helpful, and that could help you land that first tech job. And specifically just what I feel is the best approach to getting a tech job, period. Like not necessarily with language X, Y, or Z, or not necessarily in any particular area for any company. This is just what I think is the best route to getting that first job, whatever it may be. Okay, having said that, what's so special about you? So every single person has a unique background, and everybody has their own story to tell. And the being matched with a position has a ton to do with how much of what they know about you that you've presented to them through your resume or through your interactions, how much of that overlaps with the company, their goals, ambitions, purposes, code of ethics, all that, what they do. The stronger the overlap is, the more likely you will get engagement and you'll be able to get into a discourse with them, maybe get an interview and ultimately get that job. So the whole context of this presentation will sort of be around that, this matching. So not only are we all unique, we all have our own experiences, but software companies, there's a plethora of them. There's all kinds, delving into all sorts of very distinct areas like healthcare, which is my software company's purviews. They're dealing with electronic health records and other healthcare related technology. There's social media companies, as we all know, Twitter, Facebook. There's accounting technology. There's graphic arts, Photoshop, photography, all sorts, games, government, retail. There's just the whole gamut is as broad as, the sphere of human interest and engagement, basically. So anything you could imagine, there's probably a software company related to it. And this is just showing you some of the key players, but not nearly all of them. So what is your unique story? So think through what about you and what you've endured and the things you've done, the jobs you've had, the skills you've learned, the formal education you had, informal education, volunteering you've done, hobbies you have. What of that can you kind of distill into a story that is captivating and compelling and kind of really captures your essence, as concisely as possible? Really, like, think about that, and if you could pin that down, that's really important as the basis of everything else I'm going to say. So just as a starting point, sort of, how can you condense all these things you've done? How does that make you and define you, right? So that'd be like the first step. So come up with a list of areas after you have this story. Come up with a list of areas that align most strongly with your story, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, if you worked in, the coal mines, as a random example, and you know all about the tools, the tooling, the machinery, the management lines, the workers that are needed and equipment, everything to do with that, right? Like you were working it and you did it for some time and you're quite proficient. Maybe there are software companies that deal with those specific applications, whether it's, personnel management, resource management, running that operation, something to do with that subject matter that you were really immersed with, and right there that you sort of have this distinct story about you. So try and think about that. There, like I said, there's a whole gamut and, nearly endless, as far as human activity is concerned, list of software that pertains to all sorts of different areas and applications. So try to come up with a list, just research, right? Look online and see, are there software companies that deal with this in some way, right? Can you make some connections? The stronger, the better, right? But is there anything there? So it's all about positioning. So you need to market yourself and leverage your story. So as I mentioned, past employment, education, formal and informal, hobbies, charities, academics, volunteer work, and so on. So speaking of the research areas that align most closely with your story. So out of these, nearly endless different areas that you could work in and positions that are available, which align most strongly with your own story, right? With this one-page capture of who you are and your experiences and what makes you distinct and unique, right? So hone in on those areas. Once you've identified the areas, you can then refine your story to then emphasize those overlapping points even more, or draw even stronger connections to those areas. You know what I mean? So you can actually just tailor it and form it so it'll be an even closer match to, say, golfing software, because you have tons of experience, working at the golf course and picking up golf balls and seeing what happens and everything, or whatever the thing is that you're doing. You've been a doctor, so you know how the hospital works. So you've been a lawyer, so legal software. But anything that's connected, there's other things that aren't directly like legal software that would be quite relevant with the knowledge and the unique experiences and skill set that are peculiar to a lawyer, that would be specific to a lawyer, right? That would fall in that expertise. So sort of you can then refine your story and hone it to those areas of software, those positions and jobs that are relevant and pertain to your story. And you can kind of just make it so it flows better. So it just aligns better your presentation of yourself, right? And your experience being what I call your story. So in alignment and out of alignment. So you want to be in alignment with those identified areas, your story aligning with those areas as much as possible, right? Because basically, when you get to the point of presenting yourself in whatever form, in person, online, on LinkedIn, you want your story there to align with that company that is going to be at that point of contact, right, with it. So it does involve quite a bit of research for sure, but there's plenty of information available online. You can search all sorts of job boards out there for, using keywords to find like coal software, legal software, hockey store software, and various combinations, right? You can kind of get a sense of like what are the key players as far as software in those areas and so on, like just to get you started. So the interview and how to get it. So hiring managers often get hundreds of applications and positions, if not thousands, right? So the key thing is you want to stand out and catch the eye of the hiring manager to get that interview. So you need to be different than the rest, right? And your story presented to the right company should immediately stand out. And if it's not in alignment with who you're presenting it to, it's really hard to do that. What do I mean? Because these are just words, right? But in practice, like, just get the sense of, there are so many different boot camps with so many junior dev or entry level graduates, right, that are vying for these positions, right? And there's like hundreds of applicants. So it all looks like a giant mass of applicants to the hiring manager. There's no way they have the resources to meticulously look through every single person, right, that's applying for the job. So if for this position, right? There's 300 applicants, and you have done your research. Like, this was, like I said, a company that does align with your story. They do deal with subject matter that you're familiar with, right? That your own experiences align with, that maybe your formal education aligns with, right? If you can communicate that really clearly and articulate it really well and compellingly, it will stand out, no doubt. In that massive applicants, you will stand out, and you will be identified, and you will be contacted. And I know this from personal experience in applying this very same strategy. So, you don't want to be just another junior dev where you're just in this lottery and maybe you'll be picked, maybe you won't. You want to sort of strategize your approach to target those companies specifically that do align with your own story, or how you formulated it the most closely, so that you will stand out. Because if you just apply to like a software company that has nothing to do with your background or anything at all, it may work out, but I'm just saying, or I'm proposing, that the chances would be a lot lower. You're more likely to be sort of a number among the massive applicants, if that makes sense. So a bit about me. So my background at first glance has like nothing to do with software, right? At all. I have got my bachelor's of science in nursing. I've been a registered nurse for 7 years. I worked as an organ transplant coordinator, and that was like an office job. Basically, you had a bunch of screens and you dealt with the organ transplant registry, and you try to connect potential donors with potential recipients so people could get the kidney or the heart they need and so on. And I worked in various hospitals. So that was like bedside nursing, like emergency or wherever else. I worked in various places. I worked as a researcher, both like paid and as volunteer work, doing medical research. I published research. This was like all around, university, and a few years immediately after graduating university that this stuff took place. And I worked for some healthcare nonprofits, so just healthcare stuff. So how is this relevant to tech, right? Like, how do you tie me as a case study? Like, how do you tie this to tech? Because they're pretty different. So in making my own story that I propose you craft about yourself, I looked at where I can draw these connections, right? So the strongest candidates, so with my organ transplant coordinator experience, so I did 4 years of that. I used special software and databases. So I had that user perspective, interacting with databases and getting the query in and getting the information back. And I worked with actual software engineers that we had on-prem that helped to troubleshoot and debug issues that would happen, because we used like custom software, and there would be issues to work through. In the hospital, I use the health record software daily, right? So I have the UI, UX sort of experience of using it and knowing how it works and how to maneuver it. And all that stuff is relevant, especially to a healthcare software company, because it takes quite a while to learn that, right? So if you already know that, then you have a leg up, right? If you already have all that knowledge. Medical research, so I just connected that with, collecting, organizing, analyzing data, which are analytical skills, basically. That's the connecting factor, the overlapping factor that are used in software engineering. So the use of the raw data. And my medical knowledge. So, I was trained in medical terminology and concepts, how things work, how hospitals work, and how compensation happens and stuff like that. So marketing your story. So LinkedIn is super useful. And I only use LinkedIn for my job hunt because I didn't find I had to go anywhere else. I found that LinkedIn had tons of job postings, and it was good because it was a communication platform where you can just, hiring manager could message you, you could reach out to them, to recruiters. So it's kind of like all in one place. So it was very convenient. And actually, the Tech Academy had they had a job placement course, which was excellent at the very end of my boot camp. And they went over the whole process, whole gamut of things. But a big one was LinkedIn, how to use it, and how to like construct your profile. The first point of contact, that somebody who doesn't know you at all who's looking to maybe hire you has with you is your profile page, right? So that's like the first impressions. So, I was taught like how to which display picture to use, what background, how to organize information, what to communicate, and also, in the very beginning of your LinkedIn, there's like a summary, I guess, your story, I guess, kind of like summarizing who you are and like who is this person, right? So I actually spent a lot of time looking through a lot of other people's LinkedIns that I thought were doing pretty well and seeing what they did, or that were in the similar position to me, like looking for work, to see what they wrote. And I tried to make mine like sort of along the lines of what they did, but different, right? So that I would stand out, make it my own, in other words, like include those things about me that are distinctive and stand out of the page and kind of capture my experience, right? As sort of like me being a unique selling point, you can say, right? So it's marketing strategy is super important. And also LinkedIn themselves, if you just Google it, they have a lot of resources on how to present your LinkedIn page, how to make it appealing and so that it's receptive to other people seeking you out as a potential employee. So unknown and known. So this choosing of what to show and what not to show is crucial. So this is just kind of going along the lines of what I had said. So you want to present yourself in the best light possible, and you want to emphasize your strengths, your virtues, those things that would appeal to a prospective employer. And you want to, sort of take the emphasis off anything that you yourself perceive to maybe be an imperfection or a fault or disadvantageous, or you want to spin that in a way that presents itself as being actually advantageous, right? But it just goes along with this concept. Like you want to, basic things, just choose like a flattering profile pic that looks professional, right? Where you're smiling, you look happy. I think there's actually statistics on if you're smiling, it makes a impact on like the click-through rate or whatnot with somebody following up with you. And that's also LinkedIn discusses that, I believe, in their own public documents. If a recruiter or hiring manager has never met you before, doesn't know anything about you, this is like the point of contact, the first impression. So it's really important what you communicate and how you choose to communicate it. And you have to realize, like, everybody has their weaknesses, right? Everybody has thoughts about them being, deficient in certain areas or maybe not up to par. You know what I'm talking about. Everybody has that, especially if you're a new graduate in a field and you're approaching your first job in the profession, right? It's pretty daunting. It was very daunting for me, right? But what's really key to understand is you control the stage. They don't know anything about you. Nothing. They don't know your insecurities, your doubts, your faults. They don't know your virtues either or what you have to offer, right? So you are in control of that stage, especially in the digital realm, and you decide what you want known about yourself and how you want to be perceived. You actually control that. So they can't read your mind. So when you're presenting yourself, you don't want to project as being somebody who has doubts, worries, fears. You want to project confidence and certainty in how you present yourself. Why? Well, simply, if you're an employer and you're looking to hire, you don't want to hire, no matter what employer you are, right? You don't want to hire somebody who has doubt in themselves, who doesn't believe in themselves, right? Who isn't confident that they're going to succeed, because it's a big gamble, and they may lose that gamble and may cost the company money, right? Just from a business perspective, like I'm hiring people sort of perspective. So it's obvious every human being has doubts, right? And worries, and nobody is perfect, and they all have flaws and they all have their pros and virtues and so on. So you just want to kind of guide your presentation with those principles of emphasizing what is great about you, what you can offer, that you are confident in yourself, that you can get the job done, and downplaying any perceived faults. So I like to share just my case study, because people are usually curious about, how the process went for me and what happened. So what I did is, off the bat, I'm like, all right, there's like so many jobs in all these different areas. Now I could like apply everywhere, including like healthcare or medical software companies, but I really felt strongly that I would have the best chance of getting the best possible job, the highest starting salary that I could command given my experience, the kind of best culture in the company, like a company with a good cultural fit, let's say, desirable company, a good company that you want to work for, right? I was thinking the best case scenario for my employment would be if I focused primarily and predominantly on healthcare and medical software companies. I tried to specifically even focus on those dealing with electronic charting, which is actually where I ended up working. It's an electronic medical record company. And I leveraged the background points that I spoke to you about. And in the end, I received several interviews and 2 job offers, and I got to pick one of the jobs, which I'm very, very fortunate to have had that opportunity where there's 2 job offers. Not only that, but sometimes you get a job offer and like you might get another job offer, but you have to decide on the first job before, right? And that sucks because then, but I was fortunate enough where the timing worked where I could actually look at 2 and then pick where I wanted to go. So I attribute me getting to that position with what I'm trying to relay and convey to you today. So yeah, so I would be basically, just to add a little bit more to this, I'd be looking, keywords like electronic health record, medical software, healthcare software, just in LinkedIn search, just in the jobs, and I would see tons of postings, right? And I would focus most of my efforts and attention on that. I would have a tailored covered letter, right, for those positions. I would learn a little bit about what the companies use these technologies and kind of throw that into my cover letter, right, as what I was sending to them in my resume. So does language matter? So how computer languages can make a difference. So a really interesting part of my strategy is off the bat when I was just looking into healthcare software, medical software, those keywords, right? I noticed that there were like a lot of postings in various languages and technologies. So at the Tech Academy, I learned like JavaScript, HTML, CSS, Python, C#, and Microsoft technologies. So I knew those things, right? And there would be positions for like JavaScript developer, React developer, which is a JavaScript framework, right? Python even, and it would be, there would be all sorts, right? I found that the ones that were like C# or Java or C++ related to C#, but kind of different still, those had far fewer applicants than those positions with like Python, but more so with JavaScript frameworks. The JavaScript, like React and Node.js and stuff like that to do with JavaScript, those would have like a slew of applicants, like hundreds. This is just my observation in my many hours and many weeks of applying and so on. And I noticed like the C#, the Java and stuff, they tended as a pattern on average to have a good amount less applicants for those positions. So, my own impression and just surveying the scene of like boot camps and the technologies that they teach is a lot of boot camps like heavily emphasize like Node.js, React, like all the hot, attractive technologies, the latest and greatest, like the Silicon Valley, like up and coming running tech, right? Which is fine. It makes sense. It's in demand. It's innovative. It's people see it as like the future, right? So there's a lot of emphasis there, a lot of interest there. So that's fine, but it seemed like there were many more people with those skill sets produced than there were maybe even positions. Like it was kind of like a over, creation of people skilled in those areas versus far less that were taught like C#, Java, C++, and so on. And just looking online at boot camps, I didn't see very many that taught C#, honestly. I saw like maybe just a few really popular ones that did, and Java even less so, but as in contrast to like a ton of JavaScript technologies. So in my own strategy that I adopted, I actually focused on the C# and Microsoft stack. Really, that was like kind of like the thing I decided to hone in on based on probability of being noticed, standing out, and being contacted for an interview. So I kind of incorporated that into my approach, right? Now, is it impossible to get like a React.js job or an interview and get the job? Not at all. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just, this whole presentation is about what I feel is your best bet to getting a job in tech, period. So these are just some popular languages: Python, C, Swift, PHP, and so on. So, right, so I discussed this. I scoured the job boards in LinkedIn. I noticed far fewer applicants for C# and Microsoft Stack jobs, which led me to emphasize that in my search. Found a lot of JavaScript tech stack jobs and applicants for those jobs. I made a conscious effort to like put 90% of my focus on C# and Microsoft positions. And so what I've learned, especially with my current job, is like legacy software is real. Like people, like, like Facebook, Twitter, all those hot players, all the major players like that, like I feel like a lot of media attention goes to it, and people may have a skewed perception that that is the vast majority of the tech and skills in demand. Whereas in reality, there's a ton of smaller or medium or even large companies, but not as known if you're not familiar with the industry, right? That use much older technology, like legacy software and technologies, like maybe that are a decade old, even 2 decades old, or older, believe it or not. Reason being is over the years, they've iterated over their code, they've added to the code, like from hundreds of thousands of lines to now it's millions or tens of millions of lines of code, all using the same technology that were dated a little bit at this point, right? Like maybe like 20, where it's just such a big, complex beast that it doesn't make fiscal sense. It doesn't make business sense for them to like scrap it and then just use the latest, hottest technology. Like it doesn't make any sense for them to do that. So from a business context, it doesn't make sense. It's too resource intensive and costly. And sorry, I'm just checking the time here. It's too resource intensive and costly, so they don't do it. So they instead just seek out developers in those technologies. And of course, as the trends and the tides, of technology change over time, less and less people are doing those older things, right? You may have more senior people only that have been doing it for like decades that are available for those positions, whereas a company may need a junior developer. They may not need a senior developer that commands a much higher salary for the position. It doesn't make sense for them, right? So then they start looking for junior developers and they find, well, there's a void because it's not in the prominent realm of the hottest, greatest technologies being taught. So it is a missed opportunity, often missed opportunity. So I'm throwing it out there that I do think it's quite a relevant factor just based on my own observations. So state of mind, what's attitude got to do with it? So I would say in my experience, like 90% has to do with attitude and outlook, and like 10% has to do with skills and abilities. Yeah, like I had like an interview early on that was just for some startup, and it wasn't related to healthcare or anything. It was just somebody reached out to me, and I felt really discouraged because I had to do like they did a bunch of testing on me and stuff, and I thought it was like computer science degree level stuff, to be honest. Like I even talked to my programmer friends and other bootcamp friends that I made along the way, and they were like, yeah, I have no idea why they're asking you those things. And it was for like a internship too. So I'm like, wow, I must be horrible if I'm like totally flunking these tests that they're giving me, which is obviously ridiculous because the test was very intense, it was very, in my opinion, like way beyond the scope of like a junior dev or like an intern. So that was just, but if you held on to that, right? If you ended up not getting the job and seeing that you did bad on the tests, you could have easily chosen to I could have chosen to be like, maybe I'm not cut out for it. Maybe that's it. Maybe I should just give up and, I'm not cut out for the line of work. And I mean, if that's the only experience you had interviewing, it may seem like a valid stance to take, right? But the reality is there are as many hiring philosophies as there are software companies. And many software companies won't even test you at all. They will speak to you. They will maybe ask you some higher level stuff, right? Maybe they feel that your personality is more important than detailed rote skill regurgitation, or like asking, you know what I mean? Asking you from memory, like data structure stuff or whatever. So it totally depends. And it's like, it's a wide open ocean out there, and there's plenty of fish in the sea is the reality. And, you know, some apply this standard to be hired and others apply this another standard. So, you know, I learned that in doing several subsequent interviews with different companies in different areas, mostly healthcare, but different areas too, that was the case. So you definitely have to believe in yourself, and you have to, if you expect somebody to hire you, you know, you have to believe in yourself, because it carries over to the person you're speaking to, right? Like they can sense that you're maybe doubtful or kind of standoffish a little bit, or, you know, you're scared, you have something to hide, maybe it's an insecurity or whatever. Like that kind of translates to a communication flow with a potential employer or hiring manager or whatnot, right? So it's really important that you find reasons to believe in yourself. They're always there, and you really hold on to those and emphasize those and kind of embody those. And any insecurities that we all have, any doubts or fears or worries, you cast aside and you just totally disconnect yourself from, because they're not going to help you at all. They're not going to do you any service. And this is obviously much more easier said than done, but I promise you it was a conscious, consistent effort to kind of adopt that mindset, that state of mind, right? I had to work at it, and it took, you know, many jobs I didn't get and so on to keep refining it and keep pushing and keep my certainty up that I was worth it and that I was competent and capable, and I would be a good employee. So it is definitely an effort, but there are ways and means as to achieving this state of mind. Of course, this talk isn't nearly long enough to cover this, or not necessarily my area of expertise, but frankly, things like Tony Robbins, there's a lot of self-help things that you can pick up pretty readily as an audiobook, as an actual book, and they're really encouraging, and they help lift your spirits, and they help, you know, you become more confident in yourself in general, right? Another good one is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. This was written in like the 1930s, where he interviewed, like for 25 years, he interviewed the most successful people on the planet, you know, the industry magnates, the leaders, the presidents, chief justices of the US Supreme Court, stuff like that, right? He interviewed them, and he kind of distilled this knowledge of what led to their success, and he kind of pinned down these principles, and he goes over it in his book. And it says Think and Grow Rich, but the book barely has anything to do with growing rich. It's basically just the overall mindset of how do you achieve what you want to achieve, right? How do you get the state of mind you need to achieve what you want? And I think it's a great book, and there's a lot of really cool, like true to life stories from his interviews with these people. And it's not a super long read. I'd recommend it. I think it's like an 8-hour audiobook, so you can just have it on the background. But anyway, I'm just offering some advice, some direction, right, on things that I feel that did help me, that I feel would likely help you too. So this is just kind of, you know, one illustration of this concept I'm trying to relay. Like your own beliefs in yourself, your abilities, your disabilities, your limitations, all that stuff leads to judgments that you then pass that translate to actions or a lack of action on your part, and then you get the results from that. But it all of the underpinning foundation is the beliefs you have in yourself, right? So how to level up? How do you get confidence and experience? And those things are interconnected, right? Naturally, as you get more experience in something, as you do it more, as you have more successes with it, and even failures that you learn from and then move up from, grow as a result of, you know, more experience leads to more confidence naturally. So how do you get the confidence and the experience? So, you know, I was fortunate enough to have friends that were developers, and other bootcamp graduates and colleagues that I talked to about this. And some really big ones were open source projects like GitHub. There's various platforms, but GitHub's a big one that hosts the source code, right? That you can then create like a fork and get it on your machine and fix a bug or add a feature or something, right, to improve it. And then you can push it up and ask them to pull it in and merge it with their code, right? So that's an approach you can take to get experience, because there's it's not like there's so many people lining up to do this, right? It's like volunteers are scarce, so they're happy to have help. And reaching out, looking into these things and connecting with people who manage the GitHub page for whatever open source project you want to work on, no doubt you'll find people that are really keen and would be interested in helping you, or in having your contribution. So that's a really good way to get experience, and that will, you know, give you the confidence that you need to move up as well, and to get a successful interview and job offer result. So there's also volunteer like hackathons, believe it or not, and like coding work. Like various charities don't have the money for developers, right? So I can't think of any off the top of my head, honestly. I recall one that was mentioned in, I think, New Orleans, but it was for a charity where coders would log on for like the weekend, and they would just like help their web application, like clean it up and stuff like that, do some back end work. And it was all voluntary, and it was kind of like collaborative. And it's a really good experience because you have other people, resources that you can reach out to, more senior developers that can help you, teach you things, right? And you can also get a product at the end of it that you can then highlight on your resume and on your LinkedIn page. So, and also networking. So just talking to people, getting your name out there, connecting with others is super important. And you never know who you're going to find. You never know if you're going to find somebody who loves teaching people, who loves being a mentor to people, who loves guiding people, right? There are people that love that stuff. So I was fortunate enough to connect with some of them, and they were extremely helpful in my success. So just networking, getting your name out there, and just being open to communicating with other people can go very far. And it lends itself to good advice. It lends itself to, you might get a work opportunity, you might get like a pro bono opportunity. Maybe they'll let you work on something that they're working on. A lot of developers have side projects, right? Maybe there's something that they'll want you to work on or contribute to, paid or unpaid. Either way, it's experience, and it's a good learning opportunity. And a lot could come out of just connecting to people and seeing what's out there and making yourself known. So just to recap on what I've said, your story is key. So again, to reiterate, your story, really what it is in substance is that thing which others see that is an avatar for who you are, is you, because they don't know what's going on in your head, right? They don't know you. They haven't met you in person in most cases these days, right? It's all digital. So it would be that kind of encapsulation or essence of you that you're presenting, and that would be their point of contact, right? So they'd be contacting your LinkedIn rather than you, at least before messaging you directly, right? That would be like the interface. So your story is super important, and you want to maximize its power and leverage it with the right companies. So for the best odds of getting employment, period, you want to select those companies that have greatest alignment and agreement with your own existence, like what you've done, work history, and those things that I discussed before. So definitely do your research before embarking. Kind of scope it out, see what's out there, see all the relevant companies that align with your own story, the closest matches out there, and target those areas. Refine and develop your approach, like iterate over it. As for example, like I said, I refined my approach in targeting predominantly C# and Microsoft technology because I noticed there's more opportunity and less competition there, right? So that was just something I discovered as I was doing my research for healthcare positions. For example, I didn't get any like interview invites for like Python or JavaScript or whatever for like healthcare related tech, but I did for C# and .NET framework and Microsoft. So that ended up being an effective strategy for me. Marketing is very important, how you present yourself. Get experience to further your confidence and appeal. and believe in yourself. So you got this. That's all I have to say.
Great presentation, Alan. That was really well articulated, and you kind of hit all the key points of what it takes to find your first job in the tech industry. And I think kind of a key thing, like finding or leveraging your past with the experience you have. I think that's really going to give you the best chance for finding work afterwards. And it can get you like some really good job offers, salary wise, that kind of thing. So yeah, really good key points there. And yeah, it was a great talk. Now attendees, you're welcome to raise your hand if you want to ask a question. You can also put your questions in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. So Alan, talk a little bit about what it was like with researching companies when you found you were going into a job interview and you did your research. What kind of things would you do for your research?
To prepare for the interview?
Yeah, for the interview.
I would go to the company website and I'd look at their product. There was one instance where I actually had the opportunity to get like a demo of their product, which was cool, that I could interact with. That won't always be the case. But there was one instance where I actually downloaded their software and I actually used it. And I learned it a little bit and I got to see the merit of it. So I could actually speak to it during the interview. That it did interest me and it was something that I wanted to work with. But yeah, just going on the website, getting familiar with their purpose, their direction, their goals, their past, sort of what their leadership looks like, the things they say about the company and the direction of the company. Of course, the technologies they use, but a lot of that is in the posting, in the job description. Just really like understanding, at least at a high level, like what do they do and what is their target market, and what are kind of their goals and the directions that they're heading in.
Got it. And I like your analytical approach to finding work as well. Like you kind of put it together like, okay, I've got this experience. This gives me the best chance. So this is what I'm going to focus on, which I think is a really good key point. Now, did you get much rejection with jobs you applied for?
Yeah, I definitely, and it was like two-way rejection in the sense like I would get an opportunity. So one policy I had is like never throw away an opportunity. There's nothing you're gonna lose. Like if there's a job that comes and you're like, oh, I'm not too excited about it, you're not gonna lose anything by going along in the process and just experiencing that and kind of getting a feel for the flow of things, right? The more interview experience you have, the more experience you have going through their questionnaires and all that, the better off you'll be. The more confident you'll be, the more experience you'll have. So there would be times where I'd always hear out the opportunity and I'd like dig into it and I could be like, well, ultimately, I don't really want to do that. For whatever reason, it could be that, the compensation was just like extremely low, or it could be various factors. It wasn't remote. I would have to go somewhere. I didn't know that off the cuff, right? And I got rejected as well, for sure. I definitely got rejections. And it's hardest at first. It's like any rejection, right? Like if you're asking somebody out or like whatever, if you have it once, the first one's like horrible, and then you get a few and you're like, oh, okay, well, like I'm used to it. And you just kind of learn from it, and you learn how to keep a positive outlook in spite of, and how to sort of keep your head above water, and looking towards the positive aspects of it and whatnot.
Yeah, and the more interviews you do and the more experience you get, the better you get at presenting. So
Totally. Definitely.
We do have a couple of questions. Damien asked, did you notice a lot of jobs for quality assurance testers? Is this common to get a tech job to start with a tech job? We call it quality assurance.
So QA, I did see QA jobs, definitely. Yeah, I did see them, and I had recruiters reach out to me through LinkedIn about QA positions. So they're definitely out there, and they're fairly common in my own experience in looking for jobs. Um, but yeah, I was sort of focused on I wanted to be a developer as my first position. So I wasn't like explicitly looking for QA, but as I'd be like looking through the job postings and what I was searching, I would find a good amount of QA pop up, I would say. So it's definitely out there and it's definitely needed and wanted.
Well, and it's a good way. It's a good way to get your feet in the door, or your foot in the door.
Mhm.
We've definitely had students hired as quality assurance,
Mhm.
and it was, kind of a first step for them to move up into being a developer with
Mm.
that company. So it's definitely a good place to start.
Definitely, yeah.
Uh,
If you can get into the company and you like the company and you get along with people, it's that much easier than if you wish to look at like internal job postings, right? And kind of maneuver your way there with that experience that you get.
no, good stuff. Now, Winnie Freed asks, "What have you noticed about Python's popularity?"
So just in the context of my job search, which again was like um, emphasized like healthcare and medical software stuff, um, it wasn't super common that I'd find like Python postings. As you may already know, it's machine learning is like where Python is like heavily used. It's like really big in certain companies like Google and Facebook and stuff, because they have the biggest library and the most like comprehensive libraries that deal with that stuff. And also like data analysis is like another big use case for Python. I would find like postings along the lines of machine learning or along the lines of data analysis to do with Python, but it wasn't super common. I don't know if I had to put a number to it, just again in the context of like my job search, right? So not necessarily everybody's job search how it would go, but maybe like 10%, I would say. And then like a large percentage was like JavaScript tech, like maybe like 50%, like a big chunk. And then maybe like 15%, no, maybe like 20% C Sharp, Microsoft Stack, .NET, and then some Java as well. So
No, good stuff. Now, are you currently working in the .NET stack?
yeah, I'm working in the .NET stack, and I'm using C Sharp, Microsoft technology, SQL Server, all that stuff. The key things that we learned at the Tech Academy. So it's really good. It aligned really well with my experience.
Yeah, there is a lot of business and enterprise that use the .NET stack,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of the reasons we started the school with that stack.
Yeah, it makes total sense from what I can see too. And there's like, it's not just you guys, there's like other boot camps that are like, you should really go into C Sharp and .NET because there is a lot of opportunity. Like you said, it's super popular, and it would be largely at the companies that like aren't getting all the media coverage and stuff. So maybe, the average person wouldn't know about them, but they're there and there's a lot of them. It wouldn't be like a Facebook or a Twitter necessarily that would be using them. They use different stacks. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and I like the points you made about the legacy code too, or legacy systems that companies use. It is something, it's really hard to change, and companies don't want to change unless they absolutely have to. So
Mhm.
knowing legacy code and how that works is definitely a really good knowledge to have.
Yeah, from a company leadership viewpoint, it's like they don't care about, like, they're not partial to a stack or technology. It's like it's all from the economic lens, right? Business operations and like capitalization, all that stuff. It's all in that context. So if it makes sense for them to maintain even a dated code base, even if they're developers, they have to hire more costly because they're more rare or whatever. They kind of equate that and make that calculation and determine like, do we proceed with it or do we, reinvent it as like a newer technology, right? There's always like reason behind it beyond it's the latest and greatest that takes precedence over it. So you'll see a lot of legacy software and older, less publicized technology that's still being used quite a bit.
All right, and we've got another question from Winifred. Anything related to the cloud, AWS and Azure? Are you using Azure with the .NET?
You know what? I would have preferred to use Azure because like I'm already in the Microsoft stack. The company that I work for chose to use AWS. That was just in being presented with Microsoft representatives in AWS. It just made sense for them to use AWS. So there is an opportunity to work in the cloud. As you may already know, like it's a very big trend for companies to migrate over to the cloud. And there's some key players. AWS has half the market, 50%. Microsoft has 25% of the market with Azure. Google has like 9%. And then there's like little ones, like Oracle and stuff that have smaller percentages. But the big ones would be AWS and Azure. And I'm lucky that pretty soon, in the coming months, maybe within the next half year, I'll be actually likely working more with AWS. So I actually decided to get some like Udemy courses on AWS certification. There's like the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification, which is like just entry basic stuff. It's like 16 hours of video. And then you do the exam and you have a certification you can post on your LinkedIn profile or wherever you'd like, and it validates that you have knowledge in that area. So I'd say it's definitely an asset to get that. And I would say it's not too difficult, given what you know when you graduate the bootcamp, to do that. And I think it actually solidifies knowledge of like how servers work and like the HTTP protocols and stuff like that, like the networking. I thought it was very good because I'm actually almost through it myself, the intro one. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. Azure has the same sort of thing, right? It's like they have their exams, their certifications, they have like different certifications, like for a developer, for like QA, DevOps, whatever. So pick the ones that align with your goals most, or that are most in demand, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And it's definitely worth doing.
All right, good stuff. Any more questions? Like I said, you can raise your hand if you'd like, or leave a question in the chat. All right, looks like that's about it, Alan. Well, really good presentation. We appreciate it. And really good success story. That was a really good, really well articulated. And yeah, we'd definitely love to have you back.
Sounds good. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and I'll just let everyone know we are recording this and we will upload it to our YouTube channel so you can watch it again at your convenience. And I'm also posting our website for the school, learncodinganywhere.com. It's for the Tech Academy. And we do have a lot of offerings for learning the .NET stack, learning database and Python. So you can check out our offerings at our website. And thanks again, Alan. And really good to see you. And on with continued success.
Thanks so much. Good to see you too. Take care, guys.
Right. Yep. All right, everyone. Have a good weekend. Thanks for coming out. And we will see you next week.
Bye.